sea. There's something about it, isn't there? Whether it's the air or the beach, the mystery, or even the boundless lengths and breadths of it all, we are fascinated by it. People are drawn out by the droves every year just to see it. Some people even find themselves paying a fair amount of money just to arrive to behold its beauty. Many people in times past have made a habit of watching the ships come in. A pastime, if you will. There is a certain je ne sais quoi about watching a ship come in and dock. For the residents of Rhode Island living near Newport Harbor in 1750, this pastime was all too familiar. It's what people did. One fateful day in 1750, the local residents who attained a thrill out of such activities arrived at the harbor to watch the ships come in and dock with their cargo. It was a normal day. Nothing about it indicated how strangely it would all turn out in the end. A fishing boat had gone out for the morning's run earlier in the day, and now started to head back to shore with its load in tow. The captain spotted another ship, the Seabird, sailing in the same direction. As he passed by, he spotted the captain, John Durham, on the deck at the helm. The friendly fishing boat captain gave a wave, and Captain Durham gave a wave back. The fishing boat captain made his way back to shore and met up with his associates, delivering his load. But he couldn't get the Seabird out of his mind. There was nothing out of the ordinary about it, nothing that would indicate an oddity of some sort. There was just something nagging at his mind. He gave a look back and saw the ship at a distance, still on course to dock. The fishing captain shrugged it off and continued his work, ignoring whatever was tugging at his mind. Eventually, the Seabird made it to shore and gently docked exactly where it was supposed to. There was a load that the ship had picked up in Honduras, and it had been a long voyage to its destination. The captain was probably ready to relax and have a drink after such a long journey. But that didn't seem to be the case. The ship simply sat. The dock workers looked at each other in puzzlement. What do we do? They thought. They called up to the ship, but there was no reply. Maybe something was wrong. But how could there be? The ship had just made a perfect dock, after all. You don't make a perfect dock if something was wrong. Eventually, after a ridiculous amount of wait time, they decided to force entry into the ship. The first thing that met them upon entry was dead silence. There was nothing. No sign of anyone greeted them. Except that wasn't exactly true. There was a strong smell of tobacco hanging in the air when they entered. How was there tobacco if there were no people? The first thing they looked for was the cargo. Did they run into pirates somewhere in the ocean? But that didn't seem likely, as the cargo was secured and accounted for. There was money simply laying about. It seemed unlikely that pirates wouldn't even have touched plain, easy-to-get money. They discovered a dressing gown in another room that had been set aside as if someone were going to be wearing it that day. On the table, breakfast was laid out, ready to be eaten, and coffee was boiling on the ship's stove. Upon further inspection, a dog and a cat were found alive and well aboard the ship. A dog and a cat, but no people. There were no signs of violence on the ship, no indication that anyone had been ill, and as the old sailing maxim teaches, everything was in its place. So what had happened here? The men who had inspected the deck found one thing of note, and only one thing. The longboat was missing. The skiff, however, was still in its place. The missing boat would seem to indicate a panic of some sort occurred, but all of the other evidence seemed to indicate that there was no such panic. While the investigation was still ongoing, one of the men managed to acquire the ship's log, which was exactly where it should have been. Nice, neat, and in its place, as was the custom. A minuscule amount of light was, in fact, shed on this incident by the log, but it came at the cost of deepening the mystery. It seems that the log was what you would expect to find in any other ship. Arrived in Honduras, picked up load, heading to Rhode Island, that sort of thing. But the last entry was different. It read simply, Branton Reef sighted. Branton Reef was only a few miles outside of Newport, where the ship docked. In other words, whatever happened to the ship that caused her to be abandoned, it happened within sight of land. In fair weather, I might add. How did the ship dock so perfectly and gently if there was nobody on board? Was it a 1-in-a-million chance occurrence? What do we make of the witness testimony who said that he had exchanged a wave with Captain Durham on the way back to shore? Was he mistaken? It doesn't seem likely that he was in on whatever happened, being that he was simply a small fishing boat. He seems to have been the last known person to have seen any member of this crew alive. People were confused by the findings. A dark sense of dread and foreboding fell over the surrounding area when word of this got out. Search parties were formed and the crew was searched for a long time. But they were never seen again. Theories on what happened don't seem to fit with any of these facts. As stated, there were no signs of violence and nothing seemed to be missing. It was as though the crew were going through a normal day and then decided to simply walk out of existence. There are some who doubt that the story ever took place. The skeptic would note that the name of the captain has changed with the retellings. Sometimes it's Durham, sometimes it's Huram, and sometimes it's Husham. I obviously can't comment on what details of the story are true, but I can say that it often happens that details are remembered incorrectly and then repeated when one is hearing an account. The human mind doesn't have a great track record with the specifics, and people will often get them wrong when trying to recount things like a witnessed crime for the police. So this does not necessarily give evidence that the story is false. There are two accounts of what became of the seabird after these events. The first is a more dramatic ending to the story, which simply tells us that it disappeared overnight once the ship had been searched and the cargo unloaded, and still drifts the waters of the ocean waiting to be found. The other is the more likely explanation. It tells us that Isaac Steele, who owned the ship, couldn't find anyone else who would crew her after these events, fearing a cursed ship and the same fate. Mr. Steele then changed the name of the ship to the Beachbird to try to disassociate it from these events and to keep her in business. But he wasn't as sly as he hoped, and people saw his underwhelming sleight of hand. Eventually, when this didn't work, he sold it to a wealthy merchant, and after this point, we don't know what happened to her. The missing longboat was never recovered. If you like this content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next video.